Imagine that all of humanity's secret knowledge, from alchemy to magic, from philosophy to science, had been handed down by a single mysterious figure who traversed entire civilizations. And what if I told you that this master left hidden messages capable of transforming the way you understand life, death, and the universe? Today, you're going to discover the secrets of Hermes Trismegistus, the Thrice-Great. But be careful. What you're about to hear may change everything you've learned up to now. In this video, we'll be guided by one of the greatest masters of Western occultism, Manly P. Hall, a 33rd degree Mason and Rosicrucian who wrote more than 150 books and delivered over 8,000 lectures on esotericism. Hall died at the age of 89 under suspicious circumstances and, like Nikola Tesla, much of his knowledge vanished after his death. Hall became one of the most enigmatic writers of recent times, and in this video, we're going to study the legendary Hermes through the work The Life and Teachings of Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus. Hall dives deep, presenting not only the biography of a mythical sage, but also the hidden meaning of his teachings. I am Gabriel Alexandre, and you're on the Esoterica Mind Portal, your channel for ancestral knowledge. Be part of our community. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We have new videos every Monday and Thursday at 7 p.m. A like supports our work and is very important for us to keep producing content. Thank you for your help. Go ahead and comment below. What topic do you want to see in the next video? The meaning of the Eye of Providence or of the square and compasses? Whatever gets the most comments will decide the next topic. Let's get to our video. Since the dawn of civilization, human beings have faced a dilemma that spans the centuries. To understand their own existence, to decipher the mystery of the soul, the cosmos, and the relationship with the divine. It's at this point that a legendary figure emerges, wrapped in veils of wisdom and mystery, whose voice echoes as if from a forgotten age yet always present. Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, the Thrice-Great. A name that, by itself, carries the weight of an entire spiritual tradition that shaped secret societies, inspired alchemists, philosophers, mystics, and even scientists over the centuries. But who was this figure? A real man, an Egyptian god, a compilation of archetypes that symbolize divine knowledge? The outset, Hall leads us to the origins of the myth of Thoth, identified in ancient Egypt as the god of wisdom, writing, the sciences, and magic. Depicted with the head of an ibis or a baboon, Thoth was the scribe of the gods, the one who recorded destinies, mediated between cosmic forces, and upheld universal harmony. Among the Greeks, the same figure becomes Hermes, messenger of the gods, patron of travelers, communication, and hidden mysteries. The fusion of these two traditions gave rise to Hermes Trismegistus, a title that means the Thrice-Great, an expression that not only elevates him to the status of Master of Masters, but also points to the three great aspects of Hermetic knowledge: philosophy, science, and religion. Hall is not content to describe this figure as a mere myth. He shows us how Hermes Trismegistus was understood by philosophers and initiatory schools throughout history as a universal archetype of the enlightened master, one who transcends time and space to guide humanity in its quest for truth. And here begins the first major impact of the book, realizing that, for occultists, Hermes is not just a historical or legendary figure, but a living, active presence who transmits a perennial wisdom accessible to those who open themselves to deep study and spiritual practice. It is at this point that the author introduces us to the Corpus Hermeticum, a collection of texts attributed to Hermes, probably written between the 2nd and 3rd centuries of the Christian era, but carrying the essence of much older traditions. These texts speak of the nature of the soul, the structure of the cosmos, the relationship between the one and multiplicity, between God and humanity. In their pages, we find dialogues between master and disciple, instructions on spiritual life, and reflections that seem to cross the centuries with striking timeliness. What Hall shows us is that these writings cannot be understood merely as ancient philosophy, but as initiatory keys texts designed to awaken something in the reader, to trigger an inner transformation. But before diving into these teachings, Hall makes a point of situating the historical importance of Hermes. During the Renaissance, for example, thinkers like Marsilio Ficino and Giordano Bruno saw in the Hermetic texts a divine revelation, older even than the Bible, believing they contained humanity's primordial wisdom, prior to Moses and the prophets. This view gave Hermeticism the status of sacred knowledge, a bridge between paganism, Christianity, and the mystical traditions of the East. Although modern scholars have questioned the literal antiquity of these texts, the fact remains that their spiritual depth is beyond dispute. Hall then leads us to the heart of the matter. What does it mean to be thrice great? Here we find one of the most powerful reflections at the beginning of the work. The title is not a mere honorific exaggeration, but an initiatory formula symbolizing mastery on the three levels of existence: the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. Hermes is great in mastery of the material world, for he knows the laws of nature and science. He is great in the realm of the mind, for he understands logic, philosophy, and the power of the word. And he is great in the spiritual realm, for he has attained union with the divine. Thus, his figure becomes a model for the seeker, one who aspires not merely to accumulate knowledge, but to integrate body, mind, and spirit into a higher harmony. The first section of the book therefore establishes this grand scenario: Hermes Trismegistus as an eternal archetype, the synthesis of Egyptian and Greek traditions, the voice of a wisdom that does not belong to any one people or specific time, but presents itself as universal. At the same time, Hall makes us realize that studying Hermes is not just a matter of historical erudition, but of personal transformation. There is an implicit call in these pages that each of us can walk the same path, awaken the same consciousness, and become, in a certain sense, thrice great on our own journey. And it's precisely at this point, when we begin to grasp the grandeur of this figure and the depth of his legacy, that an inevitable question arises. If Hermes is this universal master, if his words have crossed the centuries as keys of wisdom, what exactly does he teach us? What are the secrets of his philosophy that can still illuminate the mind and heart of the spiritual seeker today? This question is not answered immediately, because Hall skillfully prepares the ground. He creates an expectation, like someone leading the reader down a corridor of mysteries, showing symbols on the walls while guarding the deepest secret for the steps ahead. And it is precisely here that our journey continues, because Hermes' true teaching is not only in his mythical image, but in the dialogues and texts that have come down to us, brimming with revelations about the cosmos, the soul, and human destiny. As we move through the pages of the work, we realize that Manly Palmer Hall does not treat Hermes Trismegistus merely as a legendary character, but as a mirror of the human journey in search of truth. If at first we were introduced to the symbolic archetypal figure of the master, we now enter the substance of his teachings, revealed in the texts that make up the so-called Corpus Hermeticum, true treatises of spiritual philosophy that have survived as sparks of a greater wisdom. These texts, written as dialogues between Hermes and his disciples, such as Thoth or Asclepius, are constructed to provoke and stir the reader's soul, leading it little by little into a state of deep reflection. And the first great theme they reveal is the very origin of the cosmos. Hermes teaches that, in the beginning, there was only the universal mind, the One, the source of all existence. From it, the cosmos emanated, not as a distant act of creation, but as a living expression, like an eternal song that has never ceased. The universe, for Hermes, is alive, animated by a sacred intelligence, and every being, from the smallest stone to the highest heavens, is an expression of that intelligence. Hall highlights that, in contemplating this teaching, the student shouldn't get lost in abstractions. It's not merely about imagining a distant God who originated the world, but recognizing that the divine pulses in everything, including ourselves. Life, from the Hermetic perspective, is an unbroken current connecting every part of the universe to the whole, and human beings, as a microcosm, carry within themselves the reflection of all cosmic laws. This is one of the central points of Hermeticism. As above, so below. As below, so above. A maxim that resonates across various esoteric traditions, from Kabbalah to Gnosticism, and which Hall underscores as the backbone of Hermetic philosophy. Have you ever experienced a synchronicity so strong it felt like the universe was trying to send you a message? Share your experience in the comments. I feel that every day. It is here that the reader begins to perceive the initiatory function of the text. If the cosmos is the expression of the universal mind, then the task of the seeker is to align their own mind with that cosmic intelligence. It's not about stockpiling information, but about transforming consciousness, expanding it until it can perceive the unity underlying all things. And for that, Hermes presents the second great theme, the nature of the soul. According to Hermes, the human soul is of divine origin, a spark that descended from the celestial sphere to experience matter. But upon entering the body, it finds itself wrapped in layers of forgetfulness, dragged by passions, desires, and illusions that bind it to the physical world. The great challenge of existence is therefore to remember its true nature, to awaken from this spiritual amnesia, and return consciously to the source from which it came. Here, Hall connects Hermeticism to Gnosticism, showing how both speak of the soul's fall into matter and of the need for gnosis, an inner knowledge that liberates. And how does this process of return take place? Hermes is clear, through initiation. But Hermetic initiation is not an external ritual, an empty ceremony, but an inner transformation in which the seeker purifies their mind, refines their emotions, and learns to contemplate the divine beyond appearances. Hermes teaches that the true initiate is one who can look at the world without getting lost in its multiplicity, but instead perceive the hidden unity within it. Through contemplation, meditation, and deep study, the disciple learns to pass through the veils of illusion and perceive reality as it is. Hall shows how these texts describe almost a map of the ascent of the soul. First, it must recognize its condition, then free itself from earthly attachments, then rise through the planetary spheres, each representing a stage of purification, until finally reaching the One, where duality dissolves and only union with the divine remains. This path echoes Eastern traditions such as yoga and Buddhism and also Neoplatonism, showing that Hermeticism is a universal synthesis that speaks the same language as many spiritual schools around the world. But Hermes does not speak only of cosmology and the salvation of the soul. Another fundamental aspect of his teachings is the sacred science, the understanding of the laws that govern both the natural and the spiritual worlds. Hermeticism, according to Hall, was the foundation for many practices that later developed into alchemy, astrology, and ceremonial magic. For Hermes, these sciences were not superstitions but symbolic languages to express how divine energy manifests across different levels of reality. Alchemy, for instance, was not merely the attempt to turn lead into gold, but the process of transmuting the soul itself, raising it from ignorance to illumination. And it is at this point that Hall emphasizes something crucial. Hermeticism is not a closed doctrine, but a key for interpreting the universe. It invites us to look at symbols, myths, the stars, and even our own body as expressions of deeper truths. Nothing is disconnected, nothing is accidental. The entire cosmos is a temple, and the true initiate is one who learns to read its invisible hieroglyphs. Within this perspective, the Hermetic texts also address the question of death. For Hermes, death is not the end, but a passage, a return of the soul to its original state. The body falls away, but the spiritual essence continues, carrying with it what it learned during life. This vision not only consoles but guides. If life is a preparation for the return, then every act, every choice, every thought must be conducted consciously. for everything reverberates in the destiny of the soul. Hall shows how this teaching connects to initiatory traditions that have always seen life as a school for the soul, where every challenge is a lesson and every pain an opportunity to awaken. But perhaps one of the most intriguing points is when Hermes speaks about the power of humanity. Unlike traditions that depict us as fragile, powerless creatures before the gods, Hermeticism sees the human being as a co-creator, someone who, because they bear the divine spark, has the capacity to shape their reality. The human mind, aligned with the universal mind, is capable of working miracles, not in the vulgar sense of magic, but as a natural expression of spiritual laws. This is true Hermetic magic, the ability to think, will, and act in harmony with the cosmos, becoming a channel for the manifestation of the divine. Hall concludes this section by showing that Hermes's teachings are not a dead legacy kept in ancient books, but a voice that remains alive, resonating in traditions such as medieval alchemy, the Hermetic Kabbalah of the Renaissance, modern initiatory orders, and even among contemporary seekers who, upon reading these words, feel a call arise within. It is as if Hermes were speaking through time, repeating the same message: know thyself. For in knowing yourself, you will know the universe and the gods. And at this moment, when we begin to feel the weight and beauty of this message, we are confronted with an inevitable question. If all this is true, if we truly carry within us the divine spark and the possibility of awakening, what holds us back? What keeps humanity asleep, trapped in the illusions of the material world? And more, what are the risks of this knowledge? And why has it always been guarded in secret, reserved only for a few? These questions are not left unanswered. Manly Palmer Hall prepares the ground for the final part of his work, where Hermes not only reveals the greatness of the human soul, but also warns of the dangers of forgetfulness, corruption, and ignorance that can drag down even the initiated. It is here that the work reaches its greatest depth, in revealing not only what can be gained, but also what can be lost. There is a point in the work where Manly Palmer Hall interrupts the flow of historical and metaphysical commentary to lead us to a text so short and yet so grand that it became a beacon for alchemists, magi, and philosophers for millennia. The Emerald Tablet. Unlike the Corpus Hermeticum, which comes in dialogues and longer discourses, the tablet is like lightning condensed into a few words, a green stone that holds within it the reflection of eternity. According to tradition, it was found under mysterious circumstances, engraved on a shimmering stone, as if it were a fragment of the very heart of the earth. Some say it was hidden in Hermes's tomb. Others claim it was preserved in Egyptian temples. Still others link it to Alexandria, the meeting point of Egypt, Greece, and the East. But Hall cautions us, it matters little whether these accounts are legend or history, because the tablet is not merely a material object. It is, above all, a symbol, the representation of eternal knowledge that survives the ruins of time. And what is the secret it keeps? In its most famous lines, it declares, "That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above, to accomplish the miracles of one thing." These words became the backbone of all Hermeticism. In them is expressed the law of correspondence, the view that the universe is one, and that all its parts reflect one another. The macrocosm and the microcosm are not separate realities, but interwoven mirrors. Humanity contains the cosmos within itself, and the cosmos is reflected in every movement of humanity. Hall shows that, in a single sentence, the Emerald Tablet condenses the bridge between science, philosophy, and religion. For the alchemist, this meant that the metals of the earth obeyed the same laws that govern the soul. For the astrologer, that the movements of the stars find their echo in the human psyche. For the mystic, that the contemplation of God is also a plunge into one's own heart. This is the beauty of the Hermetic axiom. It applies at every level of existence, from the most physical to the most spiritual, and it works as a universal key, The tablet also states that, just as all things came from the One, so all things return to the One. Here lies the essence of Hermetic philosophy, and at the same time, the mystical experience that unites so many traditions. Everything is born from a single source. Everything is an expression of a divine mind, and everything is destined to return to that origin. The universe is a circle, a cosmic breath in which life expands and then contracts, and the human soul participates in that same cycle. For medieval alchemists, each line of the tablet was a coded instruction. The sun and the moon it speaks of were at once the metals gold and silver, and on the inner plane, the complementary forces of consciousness, luminous reason and deep imagination, the masculine and the feminine, order and mystery. The process of dissolving, purifying and recombining matter was also the journey of the soul which, passing through the fire of experience, needed to become pure, transparent, crystalline. Transmuting lead into gold was not merely a laboratory exercise. It was, above all, a metaphor for inner transmutation. Hall insists on something few have understood. The Emerald Tablet is not a manual for manipulating matter, but an initiatory text. It only reveals its meaning to those who read with prepared eyes. To the superficial curious, its lines seem vague, almost too enigmatic. But to the initiate, they are living formulas, portals of consciousness. Reading the tablet is like gazing into a magic mirror. What you see depends on the depth of your gaze. That is why so many great names have poured over it. In the Renaissance, Ficino and Bruno saw it as a fragment of the primordial theology, the Prisca Theologia, that preceded Moses and Christ. In Esoterica, the 17th century, even Isaac Newton translated and commented on its words, convinced they contained cosmic laws capable of uniting science and spirituality. And to this day, mystics and seekers around the world return to this small text as one returns to an inexhaustible spring. In Hall's view, the tablet is the ultimate summary of the title Thrice-Great, because its words can be understood on three simultaneous planes. On the physical plane, they speak of the natural order and the elements. On the mental plane, they reveal the principles of consciousness and the power of the mind. And on the spiritual plane, they point to the unity of being with the divine. Thus, in a few lines, Hermes left humanity a synthesis so perfect that no entire library could surpass it in depth. And yet, the tablet keeps an even greater mystery, that of remaining veiled. It has always been present, but never handed clearly to the masses. Its symbols protect its content from vulgar curiosity. As Hall reminds us, the secret is not in the stone or in the text itself, but in the experience it awakens in the prepared heart. The true Emerald Tablet is not an object lost in the sands of Egypt, but an archetype inscribed in the seeker's soul. Do you believe Hermes Trismegistus was a real being, a collective archetype, or just a myth? Share your theory and debate with the community. Your opinion is respected here. As Hall's work approaches its conclusion, the figure of Hermes Trismegistus is no longer just a distant master or a voice lost in time. It becomes a direct mirror of the human condition and of our era. Because if Hermes has shown us the divine origin of the soul, the structure of the cosmos, and the path of ascent, he now warns us of what threatens that path: the fall into forgetfulness, the corruption of knowledge, and the danger of illusion. One of the most striking moments in the Hermetic tradition is the so-called Prophecy of Hermes, found in the dialogue known as Asclepius. This text, Hermes laments the future of humanity, foreseeing an era in which people would turn away from the divine, in which the sacred would be ridiculed, in which nature would be profaned and materialism would dominate all things. He speaks of a time when the gods would be driven from the earth, when souls would wander without direction, and when humanity, forgetting its divine origin, would become a slave to its own passions. In commenting on this prophecy, Hall makes us perceive the uncanny timeliness of these words. Doesn't it sound like a description of the very condition of the modern world? We live in a time in which sacredness has been traded for consumption, in which nature is exploited without mercy, in which science, divorced from spirituality, has often become an instrument of destruction, and in which the human soul seems lost amid incessant distractions. What Hermes announced as an ancient warning echoes as a precise diagnosis of our present. But Hermes does not speak only of decline. He also announces hope, that after the dark night, light will return, that there will be those who preserve the flame of knowledge, who will keep the keys of wisdom in secret until humanity is ready to receive them again. That is why Hermeticism has always survived in discrete schools, in initiatory orders, in hidden books and parallel traditions. This wisdom never vanished completely, because there have always been seekers willing to keep alive the remembrance that human beings are more than matter, that life has a purpose, and that there is a path to union with the divine. Hall shows how this dynamic of hiding and revealing is an essential part of Hermeticism itself. It is not a matter of elitism or manipulation, but of a spiritual law. Knowledge must be given to those who are ready, for in unprepared hands, it can become a weapon of destruction instead of liberation. That is why Hermes was called the Master of Secrets, and why his teaching crossed the centuries. Under the veil of symbols, metaphors, and allegories, not to hide absolutely, but to veil until the seeker's eyes grow accustomed to the light. And here Hall connects with the reality of each reader. He reminds us that Hermes' call is not merely historical or philosophical, but deeply personal. Each of us, upon coming into contact with these ideas, stands before a choice: to remain in the sleep of matter or awaken to the remembrance of the divine. This choice is not made in some distant future, but at every moment, in every thought, in every decision we make. The prophecy of Hermes speaks not only of civilizations, but also of the destiny of each individual soul. Another essential aspect Hall emphasizes in this finale is the notion that Hermetic knowledge is, in essence, a knowledge of reconciliation. It does not split science and religion, body and spirit, humanity and God. On the contrary, it seeks to reunite what the fragmented world insists on dividing. That is the true mission of Hermes, to be the messenger between worlds, the bridge between the visible and the invisible, between earth and heaven, between the human and the divine. And that mission does not end with him. It extends to all who receive his word. The initiate, in understanding Hermes, is also called to be a mediator, someone who, in their life, manifests this union and becomes a channel of harmony. Hall reminds us that Hermes never revealed everything. There is always something unsaid, something reserved for mystery. This silence is not the absence of knowledge, but an invitation to go deeper. It is as if the master were saying, "I have shown you the path, but it is up to you to walk it." It is in this space of silence that the seeker finds themselves, and it is there that true teaching happens. In closing, Hall leaves us with a powerful idea. Hermes is not merely a figure of the past, but a living presence who continues to speak through symbols, texts, traditions, and above all through the intuition awakened in the heart of the sincere seeker. To know Hermes is, at bottom, to know a forgotten part of ourselves, a spark that has always been there, waiting for the moment to be remembered. And then at the end of this journey, a question hangs in the air, resonating like a call. Are we ready to hear Hermes? Are we ready to awaken from the deep sleep of materialism and open our eyes to the divine reality that surrounds us? Did you like this video? Want a part 2? Comment below with the phrase, "I will want part 2," so I know you made it here and enjoyed the content. This is the silent invitation that runs through the pages of Manly Palmer Hall's work. It is not an invitation to accumulate erudition or collect theories, but to live a real transformation, to become, each of us, thrice-great. Hermes Trismegistus is not merely an ancient master. He is the symbol of what we can all become. And in understanding this, in recognizing that the mystery is alive within us, the journey does not end. On the contrary, it only begins. For if Hermes is the messenger, The message he brings is none other than this: remember who you are, and in remembering, transform the world around you. During the video, we hid a special Hermetic symbol on the screen. Did you manage to find it? Comment which one it was and what it means for. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, and stop by our profile or click on one of these videos appearing on the screen. I'm sure you'll like the next video. Save this video to a playlist and leave a like to support our work. Share it with anyone who enjoys the topic. I want to see debates in the comments. See you in the next one. Thank you.